Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're chatting with Judson Cowan, founder of Tettix Games. His latest title, Deep Regrets, an unfortunate fishing game, is currently on Kickstarter. Judson, welcome to the binge. How you doing, sir?
Thank you very much, James. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm doing very well.
It is great having you on this show. It's funny when I talk to people that are from, they live in other parts of the world. I just assume that the accent's going to come through, and I learned like 10 seconds ago in off air that you're actually American. You're just
I
living
am.
abroad.
Yes, yeah, I'm an American expat over here in bonny, bright, raining miserably Scotland at the moment.
So, what brought you to Scotland? Like, how? Like, it seems so like weird and random.
It is weird and random. We so my wife and I, we visited Edinburgh when we were on honeymoon. We did like a circuit of Europe and the UK when we were over, and we loved Edinburgh. And then she wanted to go back to get her master's in art history. She studied art history in undergrad as well. So she applied to Edinburgh Uni and came over because of that. And after she finished her degree, I got a job working in marketing over here, and that kind of kept us. So I've been here for a little over 10 years now.
Wow. And you haven't picked up the accent or anything, or
No,
do you
but
kind of?
weirdly, I just got mistaken for Northern Irish the other day. So I don't have the accent, but I do have an intonation where I kind of go up and then down at the end of questions, and unlike an
Okay.
American, like I can't even remember how American inflection goes anymore. I've been here too long.
Oh, it's amazing. How long you been board gaming? Like, has this been something that's been kind of like a lifelong passion for you, or
Was it like playing or making?
let's get into both.
Right. So playing forever, yes, lifelong passion. I feel like everybody had some Fisher Price or Milton Bradley stuff growing up. Well, I spent a lot of time sitting on the ground playing Cootie, where you like build little ant-looking things out of parts. And then in my teens, I was playing like Hero Quest and Shrieks and Creeks and Atmosphere and all kinds of fun stuff. I showed this on another podcast. Hang on. I have the cassette tape for Shrieks and Creeks here. This
Oh,
is like a
wow.
board game where you're trying to escape a haunted house, and it's
Yeah.
all like powered by an audio cassette that like you plug gravestones into it, and you see if the room you're in is currently haunted. It's great.
And matches your
Yes,
shirt
yes,
too.
I've been weaned heavily on board games.
And then it seems like story based has been something that's been kind of like I guess a focus with you when you're growing up as a kid, like story based kind of gaming or.
Yeah, yeah. I never thought about it, but yeah, absolutely. I'm always kind of driven by like I do like abstract games, like I'm a big fan of Azul at the moment and things like that. Never been a big fan of chess, so yes, I have always been heavily influenced by strong narrative and theme. So yes, story-driven things, of course.
And then in terms of the hobby, like when did you start getting into hobby games, and what would you say was kind of your first hobby game that you got into?
Um, I guess it depends on where you draw the line on hobby games. But really, I would say it started for me like maybe 15, 20 years ago, something like that, early 2000s. I was living in Atlanta, and I had a friend show me both Talisman and Tales of the Arabian Nights.
Ah,
Um,
okay.
and that was kind of like I'd not played something of that density before in a board game, or something that like so those are very, very, very different games where they're both kind of narratively driven, but Tales of Arabian Nights is extremely. Have you played that one? It's just like story. You got a big book and you're telling stories out of it.
Yeah.
Um, so that kind of opened my mind, and from there I got that. I'm sure everyone has had it at some point, that like voracious appetite to play as many board games and discover as much stuff as possible.
And when did you start like design? Like when did the designing part start coming in for you? Like I mean, your background is marketing, right? You worked with a marketing agency and so forth. Um, at what point did you kind of say I'm going to make an effort here to make something, or maybe even mod? And a lot of people start by modifying something else that exists, like with homebrew versions
Yeah.
and so forth. Where did that kind of come in?
It was. Hmm. Uh, I was on another show recently where I talked about the game Tricarion kind of being a trigger for me, which is one of Mind Clash's earlier games. Really
Mm,
dense, spectacular game. And that was kind of the one where I came away from it really impressed with the delicate interweaving of theme and mechanics.
hmm.
Like it felt so well put together compared to some other games I'd played. And that was the one where I was kind of like, oh, I want to do something like this. And of course, the scope of that is way too big for your first game. So I set off from there trying to make a big game that never came to fruition, and from there kind of tweaked my approach a little bit and went a little bit smaller. And that's where my first game came, my first published game came from, which is Hideous Abomination, which is a family-friendly little monster builder.
And then was it, like, are you part of the gaming groups or anything like that
Oh
in
yeah.
Scotland? Like, is there like a local meetup you do, or like what does your
Yeah.
community of gaming look like right now?
Well, you've got there's like the broader thing, and then there's like the friends groups, right? Where I've got like
Sure.
some folks that I once a week on Wednesday I'll play games with. It's like a regular thing. We started doing online games during the pandemic, which was very cool. We used Tabletopia.
Yep.
Um, and that kind of persisted after that because people moved to different areas of Scotland, so we're not all centrally located anymore. So that's great. And then I've got folks that I meet up with in person that are still friends to like help with play testing or to play games they've got. I'll go over to places' house on the weekends. And then there's a regular actual like meetup.com group in Edinburgh that I go to quite a bit as well. Signing Grassmarket, and that's like 130-ish people on a Saturday or
Oh,
sorry, on a
wow.
Friday night. And that's a good time.
That's
So
crazy. Yeah, meetup.com is fantastic. And for those, I don't know if it's really prevalent as much in the States, but here in Canada, it's huge, right? So if you want to
yeah,
do anything from walking with friends to maybe you're like to bake or whatever your interest is,
yeah.
meetup.com, there's a group for you to go to. And we use it all the time here for board gaming. I have one in my local city. I have a city I drive to that's not too far from us, once a week as well, where there's a meetup group there. And it's just a great way to, um, I find, kind of expand your community. So when I first went to it, it was more about playing as many different types of games as I could. And I still make it my mission every week to play something that I've never played before, right?
Yeah.
And not everybody likes that. Some people just want to kind of play something that's familiar, but as a designer, I think it's critical, quite frankly, to play as many different things you haven't tried as possible, because you don't know what you don't know, right? And there's mechanics out there, and there's certain maybe narrative designs you haven't considered until you've kind of seen it in another game, and that might inspire you to say, okay, maybe I can take something like that and twist it a bit. Is that been this kind of the same for you, or?
Yeah, I mean, you're pulling the words directly out of my mouth there. That's
Yeah.
that's very much my MO going to these meetup groups is to try and play as many games as I can. Like, it's an opportunity to experience things I don't want to purchase the giant box of and have taking up space in my house. Like tabletop gaming gets not it's expensive, but it's also expansive.
Yeah.
It can consume a lot of space really quickly, and these meetup groups are a great way to play games without having to like financially commit to them and spatially commit to them. And it's also an opportunity to like maybe it's a designer thing. I like learning new rule sets. Like I
Mm,
generally rarely play a game more than a couple times. Like because I once I understand the rules, that was the fun bit for me. Like getting
yeah.
my head around it is kind of the entertaining part of the game. There's like a meta game there, right? Where it's like understand the game, not win it. Because I suck
Yeah.
at games. I never win. I'm just there to I'm there to learn. Um, yeah, and it's also an opportunity to play with a lot of different people as well, like meet a lot of folks, which I really enjoy doing too.
That is the key. I often talk to friends in the industry who will go to like some of these prototyping nights, right? So,
Yeah,
dedicated Protospiel North is one here in Canada. There's Unpub in the States. Um, and there's a very different crowd at those events, right? Where they're often designers that are giving you feedback on your game. They're often going to go really deep. Many times they're trying to turn into something maybe they would want to create themselves versus kind of giving you feedback on the game you have. And that's important, I think, to work out things like balance and maybe try to get into mechanically some areas where you hadn't considered. But I like to also balance that with some of these meetup groups where you have general public coming in, and these are people who are light gamers maybe at best, and having them try a game for the first time and say, "Hey, I'm working on this game. Would you mind giving it a try?" And first and foremost, you can see, did they have fun?
yeah,
Right? And they're not thinking of it from a mechanical standpoint, or they're not thinking of it as, maybe they could do this or they should try doing that. They're just playing the game. And that comes with a lot of a different type of feedback that I think you need to balance off some of the kind of deeper stuff you might get with your industry gaming friends that will very much give you honest, candid, and sometimes shredding feedback on your creation, right?
yeah.
So from how did you come up with so deep regrets? Where did this kind of manifest from? Was this did it come out of your prior game, which is also kind of quirky and monstrous, or was this something another idea that had been kind of cooking for a while?
So I'm gonna give a massive shout out here to Black Salt Games, who
Mm,
they're an indie video game company that made a game called Dredge about 4 years ago, 2020, I think,
Yeah,
which is a horror fishing game. And like that kernel, I think is just so brilliant. Like I found the like mood and theming of it and everything very captivating and inspiring. So I wanted to do something similar in a board game space, but try and not be too derivative. So the idea of a horror fishing I took from Dredge. And then there's like a lot of other places, like there's other video. So I'm a big video gamer and I take a lot of inspiration from video games. So
sure.
Dredge was one. There was one a few years before that called Sunless Sea, which was a very narratively driven game about adventuring into the unknown on boats, trying to survive as long as possible and discover new stories. There's a game called Subnautica about, trying to build underwater establishments and survive on this planet with horrifying things in the deep beneath you. And then obviously you've got like, Lovecraft is clearly a big inspiration
Yeah.
to me. But I try not to use any of the actual like Lovecraftian Cthulhu mythos,
Mm.
with the exception of in the expansion, there's a great old one that is clearly Cthulhu themselves. But I tried to pull inspiration from elsewhere and have that kind of like weird horror spin on traditional Scottish folklore. So you've got like Selkies and Kelpies and all these like sirens, things that appear elsewhere but are in very, very, I don't know what your age range is, messed up forms in the game. I'll avoid cursing just in case.
And then so a theme obviously came first with this, and then how did you kind of marry that with um the game itself and how you designed this game? Like, how did you approach kind of the design of the game itself, knowing that you wanted to create kind of this fishing, kind of folklore, kind of messed up
Yeah,
IP?
I'm absolutely a theme first. I think I always probably will be, because the narrative and storytelling is so important to me. I'll always kind of come from that angle. So when I come up with a theme, in this case, like a horror fishing game,
Mm,
um, I have like kind of a mood in mind that I want to capture, and I try to find mechanics that deliver that mood, so that it all ties together well with the theme. So in, like the thing I wanted to capture with Deep Regrets was this idea of discovery and surprise. Um, and that comes together in a couple of ways. So if you're looking at the board, there's like 9 piles of fish, shoals at 3 depths. So it gets deeper in the ocean as you go down. And each of them has a shadow on the back that have 3 sizes. So they're like small, medium, and large. So you can kind of look at the different shadows and guess at what's out there. And you have a guide that helps you understand how difficult they'll be to catch when you flip them over. Um, but everyone's different. Like you can get an idea of ranges, but you generally don't know what you're going to get because there's right now 117 fish in the game.
yeah.
That it could be any one of those. So that was my aim with the game, is to make it always surprising to flip over a fish, like, and each one of them to be mechanically different and have different impacts on the game. And some of them be like event cards that have profound impacts on the game, so that every time you flip over something, everyone's focused on it. Because you're going in turns around flipping over fish, so there can be a little bit of downtime. So I wanted it to still be engaging for everyone while you're waiting for your turn to come back around.
Now you said 117, which I was reading is over 100 pieces of artwork. Like that is a staggering amount of artwork. First of all, who did the artwork for you?
Me.
You did
So
the artwork. Wow.
yeah, yeah.
It
So
looks awesome.
thank you.
It looks awesome. I love it. How long did that take you? Like that is
um,
uh,
that's a good question. I'm not sure. So I would say I could like I did it in batches, I'd do like so I work with paper. I sketch in pencil and I ink in monoliner, and then I'll scan those in and color them in Procreate on iPad. I'd say I could probably do about 6 fish in a day, depending on the complexity of them. So 117 divided by 6. I'm bad with maths. That's why I use spreadsheets in game development. Excel does all the hard work for me.
I think one of the benefits from, and I was just showing some of the artwork here on screen while we're chatting,
Oh, cool.
of being uh, an artist or an illustrator as a game designer. There are a handful of you in the industry, and I'm jealous because it gives you a massive leg up, as you know, in cost, right? To go and hire an
Yeah,
artist to create 100 pieces of art, like that cost is staggering, right?
yeah.
And so to be able to do that, Lighthouse Games is another example of that. Um, be able to do it yourself. Congrats. I am super envious, and of the talent that you have. I wish I could draw, but man, it looks awesome. As I show on screen here, one thing I want to shout out real quickly is just how much this thing is funded. You still got 9 days to go. I'm gonna put this in Canadian dollars. That's the only way I can see it. But you're at almost $710,000 on a goal of 21,000. You got 8,654 backers, and still 9 days to go. There's a chance here that we're going to cross the million mark by campaign end, which is just amazing. And I think it shows in the quality of everything from, as you're saying, we've got tons of art pieces in here. But even like the structure of your page, the photo, I know you're a photographer as well, so the photography is really, really good in this. But there's so many layers that I want to kind of jump into quick here. One is that it seems like it's, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is 3 games in one, is it not?
Sorry, it's what?
It's 3 different games kind of in one, right? So there's kind of 3
Uh,
different play modes that you can do.
there's two really.
Solo,
There's like there's
fishing,
solo mode and then there's multiplayer mode. Solo mode can kind of be co-opted
right?
by several players in the same way that like Dwarf Romantic or A Gentle Rain can be co-opted, where you kind of make collective decisions
Yeah.
about the strategy together. And then there's multiplayer, which is like uh, competitive, where you're trying to catch the best haul of fish.
And the difference between the fishing and your solace and supplies, are those 2 different modes or are they the same?
Those are just headings on the page there, so they're like different aspects of gameplay.
Got it. Okay,
You're at sea fishing, or then you're returning to port to gather your wits, find a moment of solace, and buy supplies to go back out.
Got it. Yeah, because I was looking at the solace and supplies. I was like, whoa, like there's I
That's
mean,
my next game, Solace and Supplies.
yeah, I know. Right? So, but I mean, the obviously all the cards, the artwork, the little like buoys, I guess you have, and like the. Can you talk a little bit about like the dice and like the wood components that you've put into this game?
Yeah, so the dice went through quite a few iterations before they landed on what they are now. I have a weird fixation on D4s. I don't know why they fascinate me so much. Most people hate them, but I love D4s. So yeah, it wound up being D4s. Like in prototyping, it was, the typical little pyramid things that are impossible to work with.
Yeah.
But I wanted them to feel like a nautical element. Like I wanted them to, like when you were holding them, for them to feel like something that came out of the sea. And the initial idea was for that to be like fishing bobbers, like on
Yeah.
a line of things that fall in the sea. So there were going to be these long cylindrical things that you kind of rolled and had stripes on them that were the numbers. But the design you see now kind of was born out of a bit of a production constraint, because it was too expensive to make all of the other ways I wanted to do. And these barrel dice existed. The form you see there is called a barrel dice. It's a
Yep.
four-sided one, so it's very columnar rather than like a barrel, but it's it still has that kind of like, so I instead of doing a buoy, instead of doing a bobber, I'll do a buoy, which in the UK they pronounce boy, which
No,
disturbs me.
it's my Canadian
Like,
accent. I apologize.
the like in the feel, the aim there is for it to feel like one of these old wooden buoys
Yeah,
that
it
would be
totally
bobbing
does.
around,
It looks
like, and to
awesome. I
feel kind
love
of
it.
distressed. Yeah.
And then
So
you've got the
it's
boats, and then there's like the life preserver. Like there's a lot of like wooden components in this game. And I was reading later on the page that this is a decision you want to get away from acrylic and get more into kind of
yeah.
environmentally kind of more responsible components, yet still premium looking components, which I think is really cool. And that's,
Yeah.
I think, the balance, right? Sometimes you can focus on doing an environmentally friendly game, which is more paper based and so forth, but often that'll come at the expense of quality. And and I'm running into this
Yeah.
with the game I have right now where we had a paper insert. I'm like, oh, I want to do paper instead of plastic because it'll be, so much more responsible. And I got the sample arrived at my office here, and the card, the weight of the cards completely obliterated this paper insert we had. And I was like,
Uh,
yikes, we're gonna have to do plastic, right, in order to keep these things from bouncing around. But it's always in the back of my mind of how can I make this more responsible? I mean, you were saying your plastic, did I read somewhere it's like corn base or something crazy like this, like the plastic you had in this game, like the bags or something.
Sugarcane, yeah.
Sugar
Well,
cane.
so there's a couple of things. So the insert, like you were talking about, will be molded like a
Yep.
plastic one would be, but instead of being molded out of acrylic or plastic or PLA or whatever, it's molded out of sugarcane pulp, which is called bagasse. Is the I'm not sure how you pronounce that. Is the production there, which is expensive, but
It's crazy
feels kind of
expensive.
yeah. Yeah,
Like I
like
don't
the
think people
setup fees,
realize.
the setup fees are the most expensive part, so that gets more affordable the more backers I have. So like, I guess this is where stretch goals come from. So like, I have to spend $4,000 or whatever for the setup costs, but
Yeah.
suddenly I have enough backers that becomes pennies per title, which is good.
Yeah, I don't think people realize how expensive that stuff is. Like I had
Yeah.
someone say to me, like, "Hey, you should use this. I saw this campaign that has this sugar cane pulp that they make the trays of. You should consider that." I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'm in. That looks awesome. It's this should be easy." I
Yeah.
went and got a quote on the molds, and I was like, "Whoa, this is like 10 times the cost
It is
of
very expensive. Yeah.
of doing literally any other alternative." Like it is.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll come down as more and more people are doing this and the capabilities
I hope
expand
so.
out. But right now is crazy costly. Um, I also want to call it too, which is something I love to see on campaign pages, is there's no stretch goals,
Yeah.
right? And
I
that's
mean,
something.
technically, I guess that insert kind of was a back behind the scenes and like stretch goal, but I didn't want to put it on the backers. Like that was me trying to
Yeah.
make it work financially.
And I think you
Yeah.
see that more with, and there's kind of these two camps, right? Stretch goals versus no stretch goals.
Yeah.
I'm on the no stretch goal camp just from a practicality standpoint. It is the more options and complexity you add to a game, it infinitely increases the back end management of that campaign and the
Yeah.
chances for things going wrong. It is way easier to give somebody a premium game out of the gate and set up that way so that it's cleaner on the back end from my perspective than to kind of have all these little stretch goals in there that may or may not be real. And I know that's the debate too. Sometimes there's stretch goals what people put into because they feel like they have to have them, but they're stuff they're going to do anyways. Um, for me, just if you can put the best game possible out there, that's what I want to see. I'm a fan of that. I know I'm going to get the same thing as the guy beside me. I know that if I commit on day one, it's not going to be, well, are they not going to be able to do the premium stuff I want to see in this game by the end of the campaign? I
Yeah.
know as soon as I put my pledge in, that's what I'm going to get, and I'm going to get the best possible game. What was the thinking from your end behind that?
Well, a couple of things. I'm still kind of formulating my like principles as a
Yeah,
board game publisher or a business or however you want to refer to it. Um, and the stretch goals thing, part of it is like that analysis paralysis situation. I
yeah,
like to compare it to, or I think of it like discovering a new musical artist. You go to their Spotify page and they have just a catalog so immense you cannot fathom where you should be beginning. I can listen to the top one on Kickstarter on Spotify, but that's only giving me an insight into what the rest of the public likes. So it's impenetrable in terms of their catalog. And I feel like a lot of Kickstarter pages kind of get like that,
yeah,
where it's like, here's our entire back catalog of games, here's 7 tiers of things, here's all these stretch goals, and it's just kind of like I don't want to put in the work to understand exactly what my options are here.
yeah,
I'm probably just going to bounce. And I think that based on feedback I've gotten from some backers on the page, that is true, and people do kind of feel that way and appreciate it. Like I've gotten a lot of people expressing thanks for simplifying things, like
yeah,
there's just like using the terms of breath of fresh air, kind of. So it feels validating from that perspective. I also think as like from a design perspective, there's a couple of things I'm kind of toying with as principles. One of them is that I don't like making things that generate waste. So that's like creating versions of components that make other components within the game redundant. So I have a lot of
mm,
demand for playmats. I dislike playmats because I think that they even if they're nice and even if they're made from recyclable materials, I think they're highly bound for landfills because if the game gets sold on or whatever, they may not get packed into the box. They might get
yeah,
lost. It just feels like something that's very likely to become garbage at some point.
yeah,
And it also makes an existing aspect of the game redundant. So it creates waste. Like the board that you bought with it is now garbage. And I don't like that. So I tried to, as a designer, focus on creating add-ons that add value to the game beyond just replacing an existing thing or making something a little shinier.
Mm.
So I'm still workshopping that, but that's where I stand at the moment.
Yeah, I find the perspective is always fluid, I guess, as a publisher, right? Of, exactly kind of almost kind of locking down what is that identity, right? And kind of what does your brand stand for? I mean, it's interesting when you're talking about the selection, and you'd probably know this from the marketing end, it's a category management principle. A basic category management
Yeah,
principle is the more selection you have, the more mental gymnastics people have to go through, the lower your sales. And a lot of retailers started doing this, where some of the best performing retailers, at least you'll see here in Canada, have limited selection, right? So instead of having like, take hot dogs, for example, instead of having like, 10 different varieties of hot dogs, they'll have three. And you've got your low price, you got your premium hot dog, and you got the one in the middle.
yeah,
And the science shows and the research shows that actually increases sales when you do that. And kind of more is not always more, right? When you're doing these things, sometimes less is more. And efficiency too. I think you're right on the nose. Is think how many games have you ordered where you get the game, you order the upgrade, and they ship you the regular game with the components, the base components, and then it's just a baggie with the upgraded components that come with it. And what do?
yeah.
Like you said, you toss out,
All
the
that
basic
packaging.
components that are in the game, and you put
Yeah,
the new ones in, right? So there's a lot of wastage there that can be avoided across the industry. I think if
yeah.
we do this, I don't know. I'm still championing this. I know there's people on the other side that are saying no stretch goals. We want our
Yeah.
stretch goals, but
Well, one of my kind of other goals as a designer is to make games that people can't be elitist about. And like there's like that's accessible gameplay is one part of that, but like not having premium editions that people can like be like, look, I have a fancier edition than yours. Like it's
yeah.
the democratization of Kickstarter availability, I guess.
I was reading somewhere when I think it was a comment on one of the campaigns I ran, and we had like this kind of, hey, if you're an early backer, you can get this thing, and some of the people in the comments were saying, hey, like I don't super like this because it's going to create a scarcity where this is going to show up on eBay, where these guys are going to get it early, they're going to start hawking this on eBay. So I think there's kind of this push to say, okay, well, if you do things like that, at least make it sure it's still available to everyone afterwards, right? There's an
Yeah.
opportunity for people to get that, so you don't have these cases where, I've
Yeah.
got the one thing in my game that you'll never have, and
Yeah.
that's why I'm my game is the nicer one on the shelf and so forth. Um, this game looks super awesome. Can you give us just a quick over? So it's a fishing game. You're trying to capture these fish. What's the play time? How many players play this game at a time? I know you can have a solo version, but what's the
Yep.
maximum player count and so forth?
Yeah, so it's 1 to 5. There's a solo mode that's different, and then 2 to 5 for competitive multiplayer. It's about 30 minutes per player. I've got kind
Mm,
of you can start a day later in the day tracker to reduce that time a bit if you want to play a bit of a shorter game, but that's pretty consistent. It does like I have it marked as like 16 and up because there's some adult themes in there. People are like some of the artwork is a little weird. There's a lot of body horror. There's a lot of like alcohol use for inappropriate purposes, like forgetting regrets. But generally, yeah, you're spending a week at sea with your mates, just trying to slog through really and progressively horrifying things and managing your sanity and like offloading, like trying to keep your regrets at bay.
yeah, it's awesome. With this campaign and your other one, so you're seeing some thematic kind of similarities into these weird creatures.
Yeah.
What comes after this one? Like, is there another thing? Like, I'm sure now as a publisher, your plan is to launch more games into the
Oh yeah.
industry. And can you tell us what you're working on next, or is there?
I'm just, like I have options. I'm kind of excited about it. So
Yeah.
the game that I mentioned that was inspired by Tricarion is called Fright House. That's a possibility. Coming
Oh,
back to
that's
that, I have
cool.
like a lot of the art and design done for it, but it's not fun. And I don't want to put out a game that I don't believe in. So I could
Yeah.
come back to that and make that work because conceptually it's really cool. It's about like running a haunted house and sending guests through and trying to scare them. And then I've got some other ideas. So I definitely have a milieu of being spooky. Like I like cartoonishly spooky things. So all of my stuff is probably going to fall into that camp. Don't
Yeah.
quote me on that. Maybe down the line I'll make a game about flowers. I don't know, but maybe they'll be really messed up flowers.
Oh, I love it. And then with like, I mean, when you have funding at this kind of level, which is significant, right?
Yeah,
It shouldn't be understated.
yeah,
Um, there's sometimes a natural tendency to say, okay, how do we kind of keep milking the cow, so to speak? Like, is there any thought of, okay, maybe there's a 2.0 coming,
Oh
expansions, things
yeah.
like that?
Oh
Like, is
yeah.
this kind of in the works as well, or is
So
it kind of
that's
in
yeah,
early
that's the
stages?
other opportunity is expansions. Yeah, like I want to do one that just adds a bunch of fish to the game, Wingspan style. Just here's a bunch more fish that can go in
Oh,
your ocean.
cool.
'Cause I love variety. That's an easy win. And then I want to do one that kind of adds, more Everdell side where there's like things that get added to the game that add mechanics and like different places. Maybe there's locks and rivers that go alongside the ocean, that kind of thing. So we'll
Almost like a
see.
player board, like
Yes.
an additional player board to add to the game kind of a thing, or?
Yeah,
Oh,
with
that'd
new
be
equipment,
cool.
that kind of thing. I want to do like it's a very cool concept, and obviously it's resonates with people. So I want to take advantage of that. There's
Oh yeah, for sure.
too many cool things I want to do, and I'm only one person, so we'll see what's next.
There's only so much time, right?
Yep.
For those who want to check this out, I will put a link in the show notes so you can get to it easily. Just click on the link, it'll take you there. If you go to Kickstarter and you type in Deep Regrets, you'll instantly come to this. If not, it's likely going to be on the page 1 of your For You page on Kickstarter, given that it is funding so high. It is designated as a project we love. I am super excited for you on this. I mean,
Thank you.
I've crossed my fingers. I hope you hit the million, man. I think that would just be a great little badge of honor to have this early in your career. I mean, if you're here at this,
Man,
like game number 2, I can't imagine what game number 10 is going to look like. This is crazy. I want to wish you all the best in this coming year, Judson. And,
thank you. Yeah,
I hope when you are ready for those expansions or the next game, you're going to come back on the podcast.
will do. Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, my friend, you take care. Cheers.
You too.
This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply subscribe to our YouTube channel, Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.